In 1960s, the entire world is in turmoil. There are student movements across the world. Right? There is the human rights movement across the world. Right? There is demand for justice, and a whole lot of inherited ideas and political institutions, social institutions are being questioned. Right? The most important feature of 1960s is, for the first time in the history, the hegemony of the sciences is questioned. And what is this hegemony? It's very simply put, the scientific gaze of the observer has so far fixed the observed as if in a laboratory. Right? The gaze of the observer on the observed is a gaze of hegemony and power. We see that in anthropology, we see that in biology, we see that in physics, we see that in chemistry, we see that in biology. And the best person to document this and tell us is Caroline Merchant, The Death of Nature. How the gaze of science, in other words, the privilege of the observer over the observed, observation became very important with science, right? And which was certainly very important development. But when observation became important, the power of the observed, the way science observed the world became very, very hegemonic. So there was a hegemony in the way we articulated social structures also. The biological analogy, the linguistic analogy, the geological analogy, the chemist analogy, the mathematical analogy were all fixing the gaze of the social scientist onto the people social scientists and historians studied. Now, this gaze was questioned in the 1960s. The book was The Death of Nature by Caroline Merchant. This gaze was questioned in the 1960s such that the observed was also able to observe the gaze of the scientific observer. Right? So it's no longer that anthropologists could go to the field and they would have people waiting for them to tell them what their life is all about. Right? The people were now observing the scientific discipline also. In other words, the subject-object relationship changed dramatically. So in a scientific situation, in an experimental situation, there is a dialogical structure between the observer and the observed because of what happened in the 1960s. Now, this is yet not fully institutionalized into our subconscious. There are many institutions that still work with the colonial mode of subject-object relationship in the research and in the life. But there are other instances where this dichotomy, this oppression of the subject and the object has been demolished, and people do try and move with the subject and object relationship. Now, this is a dramatic shift in the understanding of social structures also. So before the 1960s, we understood social structures as part of the discourse of the observer over the observed. And this we find in the family, this we find in institutions of education, this we find in organizations, and this we find in political parties, this we find everywhere. So who's the observer in this institution? The head of the family, the head of the institution, and all the rest are being observed. This dialectics is not gone. We now have the panopticon. Right? We now have those cameras hanging over us. Right? We are still not yet fully there as far as the implication of the 1960s discussion is known to us. Right? Now, it is important, therefore, to keep these two streams of social activities in mind today.